there appeared to be no further room for philosophy to continue. Was this really the end? Then one day, while studying Hume's Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding, Kant awoke from his dogmatic slumbers. In a flash of inspiration, he saw how he could construct a system and answer the destructive skepticism of Hume which had threatened to destroy metaphysics forever. For 11 years, Kant published nothing, but continued working out his philosophy. Already he had begun living a life of extreme regularity, and during this period his routine began to achieve legendary status. In the words of Heine, rising, coffee-drinking, writing, lecturing, dining, walking, each had its set time, and when Immanuel Kant, in his grey coat, cane in hand, appeared at the door of his house and strolled towards the small avenue of linden trees which is still called the Philosopher's Walk, the neighbours knew that it was exactly 3:30 by the clock. So he promenaded up and down during all seasons, and when the weather was gloomy or the grey clouds threatened rain, his old servant, Lampe, was to be seen plodding anxiously after, with a large umbrella under his arm, like a symbol of prudence. Only on one famous occasion is Kant said to have broken this routine, on the day he started reading Rousseau's Émile, when he became so absorbed that he missed his walk in order to finish it. Only Rousseau's avowal of romantic emotion could make him forget his routine. But such feelings were not enough to cause any serious break with the habits of a lifetime. Although Kant twice considered marriage during these years, on both occasions he took so long making up his mind that by the time he'd decided, in favour on both occasions, one of the ladies had married someone else and the other had moved to another city. Kant was not a man to be rushed into decisions. Yet his admiration for Rousseau's romantic ideas was not confined to theory. Years later, when many of Rousseau's ideas came to fruition with the outbreak of the French Revolution, Kant wept with joy, a rare sentiment in the fiercely conservative provincial Prussian city of Königsberg, and probably unique among its university establishment. In 1781, Kant at last published his Kritik of Pure Reason, generally regarded as his masterpiece. Yet not all his readers were enthusiastic. When Kant sent a copy of the manuscript to his friend Hertz, it was eventually returned only half read. Hertz claimed that to continue reading Kant's work any further would have been to court insanity. And you may well feel the same. In his Critique of Pure Reason, Kant decided to dispense with many interesting arguments and concrete examples, for fear of making his work too long. Even so, in the translated version it runs to over 800 pages, and most of it is like this. The apodictical proposition cogitates the assertorical as determined by these very laws of the understanding, constantly affirming as a priori, and in this manner it expresses— even in the finest translation it only sounds better— la proposizione apodittica concepisce il giudizio assertorio determinato secondo questa legge dell'intelletto stesso, per conseguenza, come affermativo a priori, ed esprime così. You don't want to know what it's like in German. The miracle is that Hertz managed to get as far as halfway before fearing for his sanity. But don't let this distract you from the magnificence of Kant's actual system. Kant's aim was to restore metaphysics. He agreed with Hume and the empiricists that there are no such things as innate ideas, but he denied that all knowledge was derived from experience. The empiricists argued that all knowledge must conform to experience. Kant brilliantly reversed this by saying that all experience must conform to knowledge. According to Kant, space and time are subjective. They are our way of perceiving the world. In a way they are like irremovable spectacles, without which we are incapable of making sense of our experience. But these are not the only subjective elements that help us understand our experience. Kant explained that there are various categories, as he called them, which we conceive of by means of our understanding working independently of experience. These categories include such things as quality, quantity, and relation. These too are like irremovable spectacles. We cannot see the world in any other way than in terms of quality, quantity, and so forth. But through these irremovable spectacles we can see only the phenomena of the world. We can never perceive the actual noumena, the true reality that supports or gives rise to these phenomena. It has been observed that only a man who has never seen a mountain could possibly believe that space is not there outside us, only part of our perceptual apparatus. And common sense would seem to agree with this. But such gauche ad hominem objections have nothing to do with philosophy. Space and time, and the categories, which include such notions as plurality, causality, and existence, can only be applied to the phenomena of our experience. If we apply them to things which are not experienced, we end up with antinomies, that is, contrasting statements, both of which can apparently be proved by purely intellectual argument. In this way, Kant demolishes all purely intellectual arguments for the existence or non-existence of God. We simply cannot apply such a category as existence to such a non-empirical entity. As we can see, Kant was not in favour of a wholesale return to metaphysics in his Critique of pure reason. By pure reason, Kant here means a priori reason, something that can be known prior to experience. Hume had denied such transcendental entities, ones that transcend experience. But Kant was convinced that he had restored this transcendental, metaphysical element to philosophy in the form of his categories of pure reason. Hume's skeptical view may seem simplistic, and is certainly unworkable if we wish to live in the real world. His denial of causality effectively reduces the whole of science to the status of metaphysics. Kant's view, on the other hand, is immensely subtle and sophisticated, but it scarcely overcomes Hume's point from a philosophical point of view. We may not be able to experience the world without conceiving of space, quantity, and so forth, but it is difficult to argue that these are not an integral part of that experience, or to see how they could exist without it, that is, prior to it. On the other hand, Kant's argument that we can never know the real world carries considerable weight. All the things we perceive are only phenomena. The thing in itself, the noumena, which supports or gives rise to these phenomena, remains forever unknowable, and there is no reason why it should resemble in any way our perceptions. The phenomena are perceived by way of our categories, which have nothing whatsoever to do with the thing in itself. This remains beyond quality, quantity, relation, and the like. After publishing the Kritik, Kant continued to live his life of rigid routine. This did not preclude an element of socializing, though this was always very much a minor element in his life. He maintained relations with a number of his brighter students, as well as a few members of the faculty, yet he was never close with any of them. No one was addressed with the informal du, even after decades of social contact. Thought was his life. For a scholar, thinking is a means of nourishment, without which, when he is awake or alone, he cannot live. He was more intent on knowing himself than anyone else. But the task of getting to know Kant proved as difficult for himself as it was for others. "I do not understand myself sufficiently," he complained. Perhaps he was afraid of what he might find. Here Schafstein makes a fundamental point. This thing in itself was not simply unknown, it was forbidden, for it was Kant's suppressed emotional life, I take it, and he was afraid that if it was revealed, he would be devastated. Kant was well aware that he had no friends, but this didn't bother him. He was fond of quoting Aristotle's remark, "My friends, I have no friends." Indeed, he positively recommended this state. Friendship is a restriction of favourable sentiments to a single subject, and is very pleasing to him towards whom they are directed, but also a proof that generality and goodwill are lacking. Psychologists have claimed that Kant's inability or unwillingness to form close relationships indicated a profound unhappiness. But Kant does not appear to have been unhappy, quite the opposite. Those who met him remarked on his cheerfulness. Kant's disposition was by nature meant for cheerfulness. He saw the world with a glad look and transferred his cheerfulness to external things. Therefore he was usually disposed to be happy, was a typical observation by one of his colleagues. 7 years after the publication of his Kritik of Pure Reason, Kant published his Critique of Practical Reason. Shorter than its predecessor, it makes no other concessions to the reader. When I came across the first edition, owned by Coleridge, an ardent fan of Kant, I couldn't help noticing that some of the pages were still uncut.